welcome to The Well-Tended Life. I'm your host, Carrie Wilt, a speaker, writer, and heart cultivator who is on a mission to help you grow through any season. I'm here today with my special guest, Giovanna Capozza, who has graciously agreed to be a part of this series called In the Practice Of, which was inspired by the words in my great-great-grandmother's famous book, The Secret Garden, where she wrote, "You just try it," urged Martha, handing her the skipping rope. "You can't skip to 100 at first, but if you practice, you'll mount up." And y'all, life is a practice, and it just is. We got to get up every single day and continue to work on it. And so far we've explored the practice of meditation, the practice of finding and sharing magic. And this week I invited Giovanna here to talk with us about the practice of healthcare. Yes, friends, taking care of you and your health is a practice. So let's dig in. Welcome, Giovanna. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the name of your show. I love everything that you stand for and the whole legacy of it. I think it's beautiful what you're doing and the work you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you. Ditto. I've been admiring you from afar. Our friend Susie Corey introduced us, and I'm so glad that I stumbled down the internet into your world. But for our listeners, why don't you tell them who you are and what you're about, what you're doing these days?
Yeah, so I'm a former practicing alternative medicine doctor. I was specialized in homeopathy and holistic nutrition and bioenergetic medicine. And I did that for about 8 years. And I decided to take a 1-year sabbatical, which turned into a 5-year journey basically around the world. And in the process of that time, I became a relationship coach. And I've been doing that for the last long while. And right now I coach couples and singles alike, especially people who are having a little bit of a hard time getting over their breakup. And I'm just co-founding a new company with my niece called Blue Hive Health. So I am circling back into the wellness sphere and healthcare because it's always been a passion of mine. I'm a huge proponent of advocating for your own health and looking into everything you possibly can to stay healthy and happy.
Oh my goodness. So tell me, what season would you say you're in? It kind of feels like you are coming full circle, aren't you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When my niece had been conceptualizing and planning this business for about a year, and I was kind of consulting with her, having been a practitioner for so long and knowing the industry. And it sort of came around about into asking if I would join the company and actually partner with her. And once I said yes, it really felt like a homecoming. It felt like I was coming home to a piece of myself that, I'd kind of left behind. When you start coaching, you're still in wellness. I still believe it's part of wellness, but it's not being a clinician and seeing patients and looking at blood work and doing all of that stuff. So there was a real part of me that I really geek out on and nerd out on, and that I just had kind of abandoned. So it felt like a homecoming. So it's a little bit of a full circle, but it's also some transition that's happening because I'm transitioning. I'm still coaching people. I'm still, educating and teaching and all of that about relationships. But there's this transition happening where I'm kind of like transcending and including what I used to do. So it's a bit of an interesting place that I'm in right now.
I'm interested to know how you're dealing with that, because I find that a hard season is that transition, because you kind of have your foot in two different worlds, but you're not really fully in either one of them yet. And sometimes it's like, do I let go of this? How are you coping with that?
Exactly like that. I literally just used those words this morning to one of my friends, because I was like doing this thing over here for the new business. And then, I was talking to this one client about this other thing. And I had someone reach out to me about, working with me and with her and her husband. And then I had to do something else for the other company. And I literally was on the phone with my friend this morning, and I was like, I feel like I have a dual personality.
Yes.
Even though, it's all going to be part and parcel of the same offering, but because there is sort of a separation right now, of church and state, so to speak, it's like having your foot in two different worlds, because essentially I have a foot in one business and I have a foot in another business. And I'm in that in between before they kind of merge and come together. So it's been stressful. There's been moments where it's like, yeah, this is everything's flowing and going in the right direction. And there's another moments going, why did I take this on? This is too much. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I've been there. I feel like I'm always on to the next thing. There's always something else right on my horizon. So I feel like I spend a whole lot of my time holding hands in two different seasons.
Yeah,
and I think it's interesting because I feel like there comes a time when it's time to let go of the old season. Right. And if I could just learn to listen to my gut earlier on that piece, I'm one that tends to try to hold on a little bit. And you started to let go of some things, like, right, you just wrapped up a podcast.
I did. Yeah, that's what you just reminded me of when you said that. And that took me a while to I don't even say come to terms with. It was more like accept that it was time for it to end. I had done it for, I think, about 4 years. And near the end, I was trying to find all these like new different ways to do it. And I sat back over the Christmas holiday and I was like, I'm totally forcing this. Like, I can tell I was forcing it. I can tell, like, I love podcasting. I am actually in the process of working on a new one right now. And I love, but it just, and I knew that iteration of me being a podcast host was complete. It's just a funny feeling. It's like a knowing inside of you where it's like, it's complete. And I could tell I had to take the Christmas break to kind of step back and slow down enough to say, you know what, like I'm trying to like reinvent this and make it all fun and new and jazzy. And this project is actually complete. And when you live a creative life, I find that happens regularly to people. And as high achievers, we misinterpret that as a failure. We misinterpret that as, no, you need to keep pushing through it. You need to force it to happen. But my philosophy has been, and even when I forget it, the world reminds me, is like, if you're forcing it, it's time to step back and reevaluate. And that's, I had to do that with my podcast. I'm in the process of writing a book and I've put that on hold for the time being, because I also recognize that the book's taking a different direction and I needed to pause to research and reposition myself. And it's so important to do that when you're living that well-created life. And you talk about having a well-tended life, like that's how you tend to it. You have to like listen to the whispers and the signals,
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I was literally feverishly writing down, like, it's not a failure. It's just finished.
Yeah.
That's such a great mind shift change. 'Cause you're right. I think when you feel like you have to let something go, sometimes it feels like that's a failure.
That's right.
And you're right. No, it's just
complete.
You've learned what you're supposed to. I mean, I think even relationships and jobs and things like that when it's time to walk away, you're not walking away. If you're walking away on your own, that means that's not a failure. That is you standing up and moving on. But no, it's just finised. Oh, I love that. That's like one of those I'm going to stick like right in my pocket, and hopefully at
right
the right
here.
time. I know. It's one of the reasons that I journal, because they say if you see it, say it and write it, that it'll, it's like, I feel like it goes down deeper. Like it hits my heart, and then every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I remember, and then you pull it out and you're like, I don't know where it's been hiding, but it's right in there. And that one, it is not a failure. It's just finished. It's time to move on. Oh my goodness. We're not even like a few minutes into this and we're like, life-changing words here, girl. Can't wait for the rest.
Hilarious.
Okay, so coming full circle, you are now really entering back into the healthcare thing. So talk to me, like, how do you define healthcare? Because I think, even the word healthcare is weird, and maybe it's not even the right word that we should be using here. Talk to me about that.
Well, if we think about like our healthcare as in our healthcare system, it's really a sick care system. We've heard that term so many times. And I'm in Canada where, I know everyone's like, oh, you've got it made. You've got it, we do. I'm very grateful. In a lot of ways we have it made. I don't have to worry about paying when I go to the hospital, et cetera. But it still revolves around the same concept that we wait for people to get sick. Or close to dying before we jump in. And so it's really a sick care system. And unfortunately, there's systems and things that are set up that really just almost promote a person waiting until they are at that point, right? There's not prevention built into it. There's not education built into it. So what we do as, as patients of this system is we give away our power and we give away our authority to people who know better than us. And I don't have any intentions of going to school to become a surgeon. So there are areas where I do have to give over to someone who knows more than me. Yeah. And that's okay. I don't want to, sit here and say, well, no, you should go get degrees in all these medicines. And no, of course, there's going to always be people that know better than you. There's always going to be people we need to learn from. But I find in healthcare, in more than any other system we have, we give away our power. And we do that because we don't understand our own body. We don't understand how it works. It's this big, mysterious thing to most people. And we don't understand illness, and we don't understand ways of healing. And so we most of the time live in a really terrified world when it comes to, oh my God, something's wrong with me. And that's how I got passionately involved in this. Like, I was that kid who I dare to say was a bit hypochondriacal. I was always like, oh my God, what is this? Well, something's wrong with me. What is this? And I've always been that kid. I've always been that kid that if I don't understand something, I'm always a researcher first and I'm a teacher second. And somewhere in the middle, I became, into healing modalities and stuff. But I was always curious and I always wanted to know. And I found that the more that I learned about wellness and prevention and natural health, and the more I understood the way my body worked, the less afraid I was. And so when I really broke it down, I've really been in the business all these years, even if relationship coaching, of helping people be out of fear, right? Like, I don't want you to be in fear. When I used to sit down in front of my patients and my clients, my very first thing, and probably 90% of what I did, was educate them to not be afraid of their symptoms, to not be afraid of what was going on. And I think you're more powerful when you're educated. So that's kind of my overall philosophy on all of that. And I think the best healthcare is prevention. It sounds cliche, but it really is, and do I do a perfect job of it every day? Absolutely not. I don't. I'm human, right? And I do all this stuff. I mean, we talk about the quarantine 15 and people that have been emotionally eating. Hello, I've been one of those, right? So I'm not perfect. And yet there are things that I understand. Like, I can see even members of my family, when something happens, they're like, they get scared immediately. And it's like, and they'll call me and I'll say, no, it's just whatever. And it calms them down. But it's like, I don't want to live in that fear around getting sick or what's going on. And so I'd rather educate myself. And that's what I'd like to do for others as well.
Well, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that fear exacerbates health issues.
Oh, for sure.
That it absolutely makes it worse. And that we hold fear in our bodies, and I think it manifests in crazy ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My biggest, in all of that I said, my biggest fascination was in the mind-body connection.
So talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about that.
We know now through science that there is a mind-body connection. Like, for years and years, we were taught that they're completely separate, and your mind does one thing and your body does another. And, what you think, feel, and believe have no effect on the body. And now we absolutely know that that's not true, that they absolutely affect the body. When we talk about stress, I mean, that's just an umbrella term for fear, anger, resentment, all the negative, heavy emotions. And so any of the stuff we don't process and heal gets stored in the body, right? It just does. And so when we look at the mind-body connection, and we look at chronic illness, or we look at, chronic conditions, we have to look at what the feelings are and what has been stored in the body in order to help release those conditions. And so there's a very real connection between the mind and the body. And if we can heal the mind, actually the body follows suit. That's the leader, right?
So how does one go about even starting to dig into what that may be behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It feels really daunting, right?
Right. It feels big.
It feels big. Like, I can imagine people are listening right now going, girl, forget it. I'm done.
Right.
Give me an aspirin.
Don't tune out. I don't want it. It's coming. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah. Right. I don't want to deal with it. So it is big, and it can be big. And so, the way that I started exploring it is I started to, I started by reverse engineering. It's really hard to go digging in the minefield of your mind, right? Because there's a lot of stuff there. Look, we all, to some degree or another, have trauma that we've taken on from the age of 0 to 7. And it could have been trauma that you registered because somebody stole your dolly away from you and you were just, you know, and it registered as a trauma. Or it could literally be like abandonment, abuse, neglect. Like there's untold traumas that people suffer. So if you've had any of those and they are unresolved or swept under the rug, chances are they're showing up somewhere in your body. So the way to start exploring some of this, rather than trying to dig through that, I tell people to reverse engineer it. So what's happening in your body right now? What's happening in your life right now? Because what's happening in our body and what's happening in our life is a direct reflection of what's happening inside, right? So if you're dealing with, I'll give you an example. I always joke about this. So in 2018, I was going to mix up the year, I had my gallbladder removed after 12 years of intermittent gallbladder attacks. And for 12 years, I maintained it with watching my diet, homeopathic medicines, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact remains, try as I might, and doing all the work that I did, I didn't actually deal with the baseline thing that was causing that. And we know from Chinese medicine that the gallbladder and the liver store anger and resentment. Yeah. And that's where they go. And if you're not processing that stuff, that's what happens. Now, I may have processed the anger and resentment about the issue that I was dealing with, but the body is really slow to catch up. So the body is at the densest level of energy. And so it happened after 12 years of managing and maintaining it and not necessarily dealing with the core underlying issue, that I had an emergency situation where it had to come out. So I joked in the hospital. I said, where the heck am I going to store all my anger and resentment now?
Right. I didn't even think about that. Maybe
but here's the thing.
Give you like a little, like an anger bag or something.
Right? I need a little purse because my other little purse is gone. But here's the thing. All those calcified, hardened, angry, resentful beliefs, they're still here, right? Yeah. So I don't have a gallbladder to store them in now. And I don't have a gallbladder. Like I used to thank it all the time. I hated having a gallbladder attack. But every time I had one, I knew exactly what it was linked to. Something happened. This pattern showed up. I got upset. I got angry. And then I had the attack. And it didn't matter if I had an immaculate diet or not. Right. So I knew that it was related to that. And so I now have to do the work of processing that anger and resentment a different way, because just because I don't have a gallbladder anymore doesn't mean it's not going to show up and store somewhere in my body. So I use myself as an example because that's how we reverse engineer. So if you have something, if you're listening to this right now, you're watching and you have something going on in your body, in particular, a chronic condition, it's easier to start there. It's good to kind of research, and you can Google this now. Like, thankfully, there's so many people doing this work. You can Google what the energetic reason or what the metaphysical reason is behind XYZ. It may resonate, it may not, but it might give you a window into, this is interesting. I need to examine this piece of the mind-body connection for myself. Right.
And even if it's not the right connection, to do the work to resolve whatever that thing may be. Yeah. It's got to be good for you anyways, right?
It's got to help somehow, right?
Got to free out something.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. That's a great example. And yeah, my daughter has lupus, and just was diagnosed 6 months ago, and she's 14 years old. So we've just really come into understanding how her body reacts to stress. I can see it right in front of me. Her body will completely shut down when stressors come, and even as things like sports stress, it doesn't even have to be anger or anything like that.
Physical stress, yeah.
But just to see that connection in front of you it just reiterates and reminds me, that it's all the outsides, the insides, the all around, it's all connected. We just have to be conscious of it and aware. And that's really part of it, right? Awareness.
It is. And if I can just add to that, a lot of times I mentioned how I used to as much as painful as it is, right? I used to thank my gallbladder after having an attack because it would point the direction to something I needed to look at and resolve, right? With a person, with a situation, with
Right.
whatever. And I want to really point that out because often we think stuff happens to us, right?
For
And
us.
it happens for us, and it's a cliche, and like slap it on a t-shirt and put on a bumper sticker, and it's like, yeah. But it really is in the way that you look at things. And so for your daughter, right, to
Okay.
have lupus, it's an autoimmune disease. It's kind of like you said, it's a ticking time bomb. We don't know when it's going to flare. But if you approach it from the angle that the mind and the body are connected, it could actually be a beautiful gift because it could show you all the stuff you need to work on. And we know, just as a general umbrella, that autoimmune conditions are attacking of the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where is she hard on herself? Where does she need to be more kinder and more gentle? And when it does flare up, like rewind the tape. What just happened before that flare up? Is there somewhere that she needed to be, kinder and gentler? So yes, we need to, treat these things. We need to get help for these things. We need to do all this stuff, and they can be a real gift and a window and insight into how we can heal more deeply.
Yeah. The quote in The Secret Garden that reminds me of this exact part of the conversation. He says, he had made himself believe that he was going to get well, which was really more than half the battle if he had only been aware of it.
Yeah.
That mind piece, we just have to open our minds to it. We have to be aware. And like you said, quit giving all the power to the doctor who has just this pill that may solve it all, and look at it all.
Yeah.
And
look at
believe.
the whole picture. Yeah.
Hey friends, I know you're loving my conversation with Giovanna, but I wanted to break in and bring you this very important message. This message is for the women who haven't yet cleared out the message that they aren't good enough or deserve more. This is for the women who are still settling for the love they get rather than for the love they desire and deserve. It's time to stop, to breathe, and to find the strength deep inside and the support they need to walk away. You are worth it. You are magical. You are beautiful. Giovanna is offering a complimentary discovery call for anyone ready to take this leap and receive the support of a master coach in the process. You can apply by contacting Giovanna directly at info@giovannacapozza.com and mentioning this show. That's info@giovannacapozza.com. And now let's get back to the rest of my conversation with Giovanna.
So talk to me about tending to our health, our mental, physical, spiritual health. What are some practical tips you can give our listeners for, just being that advocate, or, just doing the right thing? I don't even know what that would be.
Well, one of my cats is you can't see her tail, but she's bumping into me and purring away, and hang out with animals first of all, because that always just helps. She's being quite persistent. So here's my number one thing when it comes to personal advocacy, right? I want everyone to be the advocate for their own health. Get curious and educate yourself, right? For example, we are now, all of us, not one of us is immune to what's happening in the world, and, tongue in cheek, use that, pun intended. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we've been in massive amounts of fear because it's the unknown. It's an invisible little critter, right? It's not even a live little critter. It's a dead critter, right? So it's like the zombie apocalypse, right? Like the thing is happening. It's affecting our lives. It's affecting our economy. And the very first thing we do as humans is we go into survival and we go into fear. And so educating yourself is one of the single most important things you can do to not only relieve your stress, but to feel powerful and to feel like you understand things. There's been, umpteen things out there in the interwebs, like some fake news, some not fake news. It's hard to really decipher what's true and what's not. So
Yes.
I want to caveat all of that by saying, find a good source.
Right.
Find a good source. And maybe if you're one that tends to more fear and anxiety, don't read the conspiracy theories. Just leave those aside, because anyone will get wrapped into those and they're freaky. But just find out how your body works. Like find out, like, giving this example, find out how the immune system works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are these things called antibodies everybody keeps talking about? What does that mean? Right.
Right.
How do vaccines work, or how does this work? Or, what can I do to make myself and my family stronger and healthier in this time? Right. Everybody's been sitting at home, in front of their pantries, eating sugar and crap. Right. Well, that's the thing that's going to kill your immune system the most. Right.
Right.
So the first thing I would say to do to tend to your own healthcare is to educate yourself, and as a result, empower yourself to learn how your body works. Right. And I don't mean like sit on WebMD every day and obsess. That's not what I mean. Because I'm speaking to members of my family here if they're watching. One in particular.
Them a direct link.
So, but it's educating yourself, right? And understanding and getting really curious about things. And when you're curious about something, there's no fear in curiosity. There's no fear in curiosity. So that's the first thing. The other thing is the basics of maintaining your good health, like hydration, get rid of processed foods and sugar as best as you can, right? The 80-20 rule. Do I like to go out and grab an ice cream with the family every now and again? I do.
Yes.
Right? Do we have our cheat day and have like a burger? Yeah, we do, right? Like, let's be realistic here. But 80-20 in terms in favor of the healthy. And one of the most important things you can do in this day and age is to maintain your mental health. So what I used to tell my patients is that I'm only part of your toolkit, but you need to have a toolkit of practitioners who tend to different areas of your life, right?
Yes.
I think everyone should have a therapist or someone that does some kind of therapeutic work with them. That's a must, because we know that it all starts in the mind, and our mental health is so important. And it's one of the most neglected things. And then find other practitioners, depending on what resonates for you and what you're dealing with in the moment, that might help you to further tend to your health and your well-being.
Yeah. For us, it's interesting, especially with my daughter, us making the decision to not just go to a doctor, but also go to a therapist, also go to a nutritionist, and add all of those other pieces. I was talking to somebody the other day. It's almost like, I don't expect the schools to do all of the educating of my child. If my kid is gifted in this, I'm going to go get them extra help somewhere else, or, you're going to plug in on the other sides. And it's the same thing with our health and our wellness. If we're not doing all of those other pieces, we're missing our whole selves.
We absolutely are. I'm getting bitten as a reminder. You were talking and I just got a little nibble, which is why I jumped. Absolutely. Like, you cannot rely on any one practitioner, be it medical or otherwise, to give you a full rounded treatment, let's say, right? With just to use a broad sense, because there's many parts of you. And excuse me one moment. This cat
You're good.
is just being a total pest. Off you go. Off you go. Thank you. I couldn't concentrate. She was scratching away.
They're like only children. They know that you're doing something else, and so they must have your full attention.
Right? And didn't we say at the beginning of this, I thought it was going to be my dog who's sleeping in the front, and it ended up being one of the cats. Anyway. So absolutely have a toolkit of people, because, and look, if this, like, if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh my God, like that sounds really expensive and I can't afford all of this, you don't have to necessarily hire all these people, but it's more for educating yourself, right? It's like,
yes.
If you have, let's say, for example, diabetes, it's like, yes, take your medication. Yes. Do some research on nutrition, holistic, good nutrition, right? That is whole foods based, like not, yes, have the aspartame and the, what's that Glucerna crap they sell at the, like, no. Sorry, Glucerna, but it's not.
Eat real food, people.
Eat real food, right?
Eat real food. It was made to heal you.
Yes.
I think it's one of the only things that'll really heal us.
Well, for sure, if we get good quality food. But the point is, like, take the medication, but look at all the other stuff. And then we're talking about mind body healing. Like, what does diabetes represent, right? Like, why is your pancreas not working anymore? Yes, you probably have a horrible diet and maybe it's genetic and yada, yada. But the pancreas, among other things, represents feeling joy and living joy in your life. And it's like, maybe you need to ask yourself, what am I doing here? How can I incorporate more joy into my life, right? Like insulin, you think about it, the sweetness of life, right? So research that, like, so get all the angles. So you don't have to pay someone for all these things, but you definitely can get curious and educate yourself.
Do you have a good link that has, or some sort of a graphic that we might be able to share with the audience that
I wish I did.
Body? Man, we need to make one of those,
We need to make one. Yeah. You know what? There's so many out there. I keep saying, I used to have this ebook that I put out years ago that had something connected to it, very similar to that. And I no longer, I'm going to have to resurrect it somehow, but you can definitely go online. There's a book that I absolutely love called Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die.
You are the second guest to recommend that book.
There you go.
That is so crazy. Everybody, listen, when things are repeated, you better perk up your ears and listen, because that means we all need to go out and get this book. That's crazy.
Yeah,
yes.
I've got a stack of books upstairs for this express purpose. And for whatever reason, I can't remember any of the other titles except for that one. So it was meant to be that I said that one. I don't even remember the author. I don't know if that was Truman.
It's okay. I'll put the
link
in the show notes.
It's a fantastic book. I mean, it just in the title itself, Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. Right. And this is, so my whole thing from the very dawn of my career has been root causes. And there's nothing, one of the reasons that I left my clinical practice after 8 years is I really just hit the wall and burnt out. And one of the reasons is I got caught up in the model of alternative healthcare that started to look like allopathic healthcare, which was, my elbow hurts, can you fix it? I have asthma, can you fix it? I have eczema, can you fix it? And I started becoming Mr. Fixer. And although I was still digging for biological root causes, I wasn't digging for these root causes. And so with coaching, that's very much where I go, because you need to look at root causes for everything. And you might not, it doesn't, like I've had people say to me, oh, great. So that if I find out, what my diabetes is connected to and I heal it, then my diabetes is going to go away. Maybe not. Maybe it's a gift that's here for your lifetime, because it's going to teach you every time you're off balance. It's going to show you something. Who knows? Like, I don't know. The point is to be curious and to constantly be, like your podcast title, tending to your life, right? And not just mechanically being a sheep.
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, oh my gosh, this has been so much fun already. My brain is like, I can't wait. Now I'm like so curious about every little organ in my body.
You got to go get the book now.
Yeah, I know. My hip's been bugging me. So I'm like, maybe, I don't know.
Hips represent moving forward.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hips actually, for women especially, we store a lot of trauma in our hips, depending if it's the right one or the left one. The left one's usually feminine stuff related to the mother and the female, and the right is related to the masculine, but the right's more about forward future and the left is about more the back.
So if my hip hurts, does that mean that I'm not moving forward, or that I'm holding back?
It could be issues related to moving forward. So you're holding yourself back. Hips also represent how you hold yourself in the world, right? And how balanced you feel. And how secure you feel in where you're going, right? So,
well, y'all have been here for my therapy session. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Yeah, I'm gonna go dig. I'm gonna do some more digging in my journal.
Yeah.
I have my journal open. For me, that's where my digging process starts.
And I want to say too, this isn't Carrie. It's not about becoming neurotic, because I've gone down that path.
Girl.
I've gone down that path where every little thing I'm like, oh my God, I have a hangnail. What does that mean? Right? There's a big sector, let's call it, of the new agey spiritual world that gets really into like, oh, well, you must be sick because you did something and you manifested it. And I don't believe in that, because that's just new age guilty crap for me. It's about being curious and always being kind and compassionate with yourself. So don't all start looking up every single symptom and getting neurotic, but just be curious.
No, and I think that's a very good point. But I think what this conversation did was open my eyes up to another potential possibility for, like I said, for this like hip pain of like, I've kind of just like, I kind of just chalked it up to, well, I'm over 40 now. And so things start to hurt, instead of wondering and being curious as to, well, maybe it is tied. Maybe I'm eating something and it's causing inflammation, and maybe that's, it, or maybe there's another root cause that, I need to take a look at. So
another great question, Carrie, is ask yourself what was going on when it started. So I just recently spoke to a woman who is having an acute flare-up of ulcerative colitis. And one of the clinical spaces that I practice out of knew that I used to be a nutritionist, that I had a clinical practice, and she's a friend of hers. She asked if I would speak to her. And I got on the phone. Of course, she ran down all the symptoms, and she ran down everything she's tried, and she ran down everything the doctor said, and all the she ran everything. And it was all like about clinical and the body. And all I said to her was, what was happening when this first started? And she immediately broke down. My mom just died. I had to deal with my dad getting sick and almost dying. And she just ran this laundry list of things. And I said, well, how have you been doing with all that? And she's like, I haven't dealt with it.
Right.
So like it stands to reason that if she dealt with that stress, that her body would then respond in turn, because that her body did respond to that, and it created this condition.
Yeah. All right. So ask ourselves that. What was happening at the time of your pain?
Yeah.
That's a great question to remind ourselves of. All right, so we're going to wrap up this interview with a part of my practice, my daily practice of spotting the joy, goodness, and growth around me. It also came out of a quote from The Secret Garden, where Mary said that she could never imagine not remembering that first day when her garden began to grow. And so I always want to keep my eyes open for the joy, goodness, and growth around me. And so tell me, what is bringing you joy these days?
Okay, I'm not going to this is going to be total cliche, but it's true. And actually, before we had our initial conversation about the book and everything, I was like, great, this is going to fit in perfectly. So we recently just redid our backyard and fixed the border around my garden. And I love gardening. It brings me so much joy.
Yes.
So every time I look out my window now and I see the garden I created, it brings me so much joy. So I know it's cliche because we're talking about the book, but
never, a garden is never cliche.
I just love it.
If a garden doesn't bring you joy, something is wrong with you.
Right. You shouldn't be planting it.
You're doing it wrong.
Exactly.
If a garden is not. And trust me, I have done it wrong. I have been angry in my garden before. And then I was like, wait a minute, this was not the purpose of this garden. And I had to change my mindset for
that's it. It's just, it was a lot of work. It was a labor of love, and I'm still tending to it, which is the beauty of a garden, is that, you don't just set it and forget it. You have to keep tending to it, which is all the fun in it. So yeah.
Did you plant flowers, or did you plant vegetables? And
I only planted flowers in the garden, and a couple trees and bushes and shrubs. And then I have some container gardens happening with some herbs and that nature. We're in a smaller home right now, so I don't have room for like a big food garden, but I get that. I inherit that from my dad. He's a big gardener.
Oh, I love that. My mom, my mother gardened, my grandmother gardened, but I didn't start gardening until I was almost 40. And
it's never too late.
People, it is never too late to put a seed in the ground. There's nothing gives you more hope or even more wonder and joy than watching something grow.
Absolutely.
Like it's the most amazing thing ever, I think. Okay, let's talk about goodness. So goodness for me is something that I'm grateful for. So a little bit deeper than joy. What are you feeling grateful for right now?
I am really, really grateful for this time. I know it sounds a little probably backwards because the world is completely upside down. But I'm grateful for it because I'm in a home that makes me feel safe, that, I have a roof over my head. I have family around me. I'm grateful for the time, the slowing down that's happening. I'm really grateful for, the care that I'm seeing in other people. as a result of what's happening. Yeah. And I'm really, really grateful for this slowing down time. And I think it couldn't have happened at a better time, because we talked about where I was in my seasons, and that being in that, transitional one foot in one world and one foot in the other, it requires a lot of slowing down. And I don't think that I would have done that had everything been up and running like normal. I would have just been candle at both ends. So I'm really grateful for this time.
Awesome. All right. So last question is about growth. What little life lessons or signs of progress, big or small, are you seeing in your life, in your world right now?
Such a good one. So there, I hear two things in there, like where, what are my lessons right now, and kind of where I've come to. The biggest lesson for me right now, I mean, we said at the beginning about like finishing is not a failure. It's just like failures, it just means you're finished, right? Yeah. That's a big lesson for me. But then I lay that into the slowing down, because sometimes slowing down for people feels like a failure. And slowing down, yeah, it's not a failure. It's just a reset. And so it's really what I'm learning to recognize. And I actually had a friend reflect this learning back to me. She said, you're really great at understanding when something is complete and transitioning to the next thing. Like, you're really great at reinventing yourself. And I looked at her and I said, I am. And then I had to sit back. And what's funny about that is my podcast is called was called, it's still live. You can still listen to back episodes, but it's called She Rises, which came from the analogy and the metaphor of the phoenix. Yeah. So it was so funny and how shocked I was that she said that, when my entire life, the symbolism of the phoenix has been with me. But that's exactly what my learning is right now, and where my, growth point is I'm in that phase again. And when the phoenix is just before the phoenix is reborn, it's losing feathers, it's breaking down, and then eventually it bursts into flames. And it's okay to be in that phase, right? If we think about, the hero's journey, there's a point in the journey of breakdown before it circles back around and the reinvention happens. And it's important to recognize what part of the hero's journey you're on. And that's been my big growth point right now, is recognizing that piece and being okay with it.
Yeah, being okay in that space. Because it's not, I don't know that it's not the glamorous part of the journey, right? It's not. I mean, it's like, it's almost like, for me, I feel like the hero's journey is very similar to the seasons as well. And it's kind of like, you're almost really even past the pretty colors of fall. The leaves are still falling off, but they're
in winter.
They're brown and crinkly, and, and then you're just you're about to sit in that, almost like leaves decomposing mode.
I compare it to the really mushy part of the end of winter and the beginning of spring, where it's mushy and gross, but like, spring is coming, but it's just really, you're down in the weeds still.
Yes, it's very much there. But I think, but recognizing that you're there, and recognizing that it is a part of the journey. I think a lot of people get there and, are rush through it. And want to be on the other side of it, instead of recognizing that there's a biological reason for a season of rest.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is absolutely. My husband and I own a restaurant, and there are times when it's slow. And in the beginning years, we've had it 12 years now. In the beginning years, we used to panic when those slow times came. And it was never for any reason. It was the weirdest thing. It was just weird and cyclical. But once we realized that was usually almost every single time followed by this crazy busy season, we learned
to enjoy it.
And to rest in it, and to get those things done that we couldn't get done. Like you said, with this, I call it a time of high adventure. With this time of high adventure that we're in, we're all able to, in that resting period, be able to kind of, do those things that we need to do to ramp up to the growth that is coming. Spring's coming. The growth is going to happen again. The doors are going to open again. Life is going to not be the same. It's going to be a new spring. It's going to be, a new season.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much for giving us just a new perspective on the practice of healthcare, and really learning to advocate for ourselves and get curious. I just know everybody at home is going to really just take so many good nuggets from this today. Can you tell people how to follow your adventures and you and the new things that you're doing?
Absolutely. So you can visit me personally at giovannacapozza.com or Giovanna_Capozza on Instagram. You can check out bluehivehealth.com, which is the new business that's still launching in launch mode, but there's a lot of really helpful stuff on the website already, blog articles, etc. And if you do want to listen to past episodes of She Rises, you can still subscribe on iTunes. It's She Rises podcast. It's on there, and you can check out those episodes as well.
Awesome. Thank you to everyone out there who has taken the time to listen with us. My hope is that your eyes are open just a little bit wider now to the practice of healthcare, and that you will start tending to you in a more holistic way going forward. So until next time, y'all, blessings and blooms.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hey friends, I hope you loved that conversation as much as I did. Remember, she's offering a complimentary discovery call, so contact her if you're interested in that at info@giovannacapozza.com. Also, I want to encourage you to go check out her website, giovannacapozza.com, and go check out her new Instagram page at wellwomen.health. There's lots of great tips about how to care for you and tend to your health over there. Also, remember, this is the third episode in our Practice of series, so if you've missed the others, I really encourage you to go back and take a listen. Then stay tuned here for next week's episode as we continue this Practice of series with artist and writer Tracy Hewitt, who chats with us about the practice of creativity all the way from Australia. I know you're going to love her, you're going to love her accent, and she's got so many great things to say. Finally, thanks to everyone who has subscribed to the podcast and left reviews. If you haven't done this yet, please take a minute today to do so. 5-star reviews, of course, are our favorite, and your review actually helps others to see this podcast in their feed. Thank you again for spending time with me today on this life-tending journey. And until next time, y'all, blessings and blooms.